evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Pulseo TV's podcast ProbandoFuerza. This is your host Manuel Sanchez, the face of Armwrestling in Puerto Rico and the voice of the sport in Latin America. And today, my guest is a man who I think is a great man and has a great vision for the sport. I've heard from him like 2 years ago on what he was doing, and I've always wanted to have this conversation with him so people can get to know him and the man behind the World Series of Arm Wrestling. My guest tonight is Mr. Greg Sharp. How you doing, Greg?
Doing well, Manolo. How are you?
Well, it's a little hot here in the winter in Puerto Rico. It's usually a little fresher, but today it's really hot. And it's the eve before we fly out to Costa Rica for the national North American Championships. So, it's been a busy last couple of days, but I'm good.
Oh, good. I'm here in San Diego. Normally it's 60 to 72 every day of the year. Every once in a while we get a little warm where I'm at. Every once in a while we get a little cold, but it's right in that range. But a shout out to Puerto Rico because our host on the East Coast, Linda Lynn Padron, she is a very proud Puerto Rican woman and said loves to express that. And so I'm glad to be able to get into your wheelhouse.
Yes, she is. She's a dear friend of mine. She's a nice lady and a really great supporter of our sport and of the World Series of Arm Wrestling. So she's great. But as everyone knows, this show, it's about knowing the guests on it, the people, and I want to know the story. So just to start with, who is Greg Sharp? Who is Greg Sharp besides arm wrestling and the WSA?
Well, that's a great question. I think Greg Sharp over 54 years can kind of be defined in a lot of values. I think the first thing that's the most important thing for me as a value is Greg Sharp's a dad. He's a father. I've got two terrific kids. My son is a lieutenant in the Marine Corps. His name is Aiden. My daughter is a grad student for a major university and an academic advisor. Her name is Megan. And I think the two most single values that can be defined for me are those two people in my life. So outside of that, being hopefully a great dad on some levels, I think that everything else then becomes layered down. And, walking 54 years, 55 this year on this planet, there's a lot of stories to be told. I grew up in New York. A lot of people don't know. I went to school at Cornell to be a chemical engineer. Found real early in life that wearing a lab coat or a suit and tie was just not in my wheelhouse. And then really started to explore the world of being my own owner, being a business owner, being an entrepreneur on some levels. That journey has taken me on a business level. A lot of people probably know that I own a construction company here in San Diego. I've been in the trades for about 30 years. I think a lot of people equally know that I've owned health clubs over the years. I've owned 18 over 2 decades. I was the first Bally franchisee ever up in New York with 2 other partners. I've been in the world of entertainment for about 25 years, which is not very well known. We started making really awful movies back in 1998 and had some fun with that for a while. They never went anywhere, but as I continued to grow in my professional life, entertainment came back around. And so on a professional end, if you wanted to define, who Greg is today, certainly the owner of A2M Contractors, certainly the owner of G2F Media Group that owns RSG Distribution. We distribute for getting close to now 100 filmmakers on all major platforms across the globe. The owner of G2F Film and Television Production, which is the home company for World Series of Arm Wrestling, which is why we're on the conversation today, as well as other series like Bikini Showdown, Behind the Country, launching Bar Band Battle coming up in the early summer. So there's that entertainment component. and just really a kind of a freelance consultant of types, and I enjoy it. I live every day and every minute to its fullest, I think, and I think to define me as probably somebody who works hard, and I may not have all the talent in the world, but I try to make sure that nobody outworks me. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, if you want to know who I am.
Well, that's quite a resume and quite a story. And I love the way when someone talks to me and his first thing he does to present himself is talk about his family and his kids, I know that's a good person, because everything around us is revolves around our family and what we want our kids to see us, and if you want to be a good man or woman or a good person for your kids, that's what the rest of the world is going to see from you, and that right there tells me you're a stand-up guy, and you're a man that likes to work and is going to work without expecting anything in return, because that's what dads do.
It's one of the best, if not the best job in the world. I mean,
Yes.
I like it. I liken that because I think on an equal footing, being a mom, if you're a woman, is equivalent to that. So I don't ever want to put one above the other, and probably being a mom is harder than being a dad, right? I mean, there's levels to the family and the matriarch. Regardless if you're married or not, the mother of your children really always should sit on the highest pedestal for a man who is taking the direction to bring children into the world, right? So, I would say being a father may be a close number two to being a mom. We don't have to necessarily admit that, but I think that without really good values and a family attitude, I don't think anything that you do in life is worthwhile, because you end up doing it alone. And what's the worth of not being able to share it, right? So
yeah, that's exactly right. And I say something. I may suck at everything in life, but I know I'm a good dad, and my kids love me more than my wife. So it's all good. It's all good. So, Greg, how did you got into arm wrestling?
That's an interesting. It's very interesting. Growing up in a college town, as funny as this may seem, I ended up running a bar while I was in college, and part of the local bar, it was a townie bar, we called it, in Ithaca, New York. There was a guy out there. His name was David Bowlesby, and he was like the local legend arm wrestler. And what I mean by that is that this guy really was. He to today's standards, I don't know how he would be, but he was a guy that was a Roto-Rooter cesspool owner. And all the guy did, even when they came up with a mechanical winch that would actually bring the cables back in, this guy would take cables all day long, hoses all day long. And he had forearms, I mean, serious forearms, at 100 and probably 90 pounds, probably the size of most guys' quads. And this guy was a local legend. Back then, obviously no YouTubes, and organized arm wrestling on the East Coast was not like it was on the West Coast. So he was a guy that competed and had some national tournaments, but never really bragged about what he did. But to move his arm in any kind of a contest in the bar was impossible. And then you start to see these dynamics of guys who do it, and it kind of it's funny as this may sound. I watched a pilot on a PBS station. It wasn't Pulling John. It was a PBS thing that they did on Travis Bagent being a left-handed world champion. And so I watched that and I said, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, I never really equated what arm wrestling was, other than, in a bar. And fast forwarding, I ended up meeting Travis Bagent back in maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. He was repping Sly Stallone's nutritionals in Vegas at a Mr. Olympia. Was a great guy, is a great guy to this day. Him and I talked yesterday. We talk periodically, not just on arm wrestling, but just being dads and kids and stuff like that. And so I met this guy, and I was as tall as him. At the time, I was actually in pretty good shape. Not an arm wrestler, didn't ask him to arm wrestle, but I always equated, wow, I mean, maybe there would be some connection between, going into that at some point. Now, granted, at that time, I had already been a boxer, already played college football. I really wasn't looking at an athletic endeavor at that point. And then truly, my son was just being born. So it had to be late 1990s, early 2000s. So fast forward again, as we're fast forwarding, my son gets to an age, and in probably 2014-ish, Game of Arms comes on TV. And that kind of opened the door, because I said, son, I know this guy. And he's like, Dad, how do you know Travis Page? And I said, look, I go back through my photos of being a fan, and here I got Travis signed his Sly Stallone picture. I said, there's the guy. And I was at a point in my life, Manolo, where I said, I really need something to focus on for me. I was in the height of owning Explode Fight Series. We were the largest regional promoter in the world at that time. We put more people into the UFC and Bellator than any other promotion from 2012 to 2016. But for me, on a personal end, on a personal competition, and I had nothing really going. So I ended up following the UAL, finding myself, I think at the time, might have been Huntington Beach, meeting this guy Rizzo in some sort of merchandise clothing place in a back office. And he told me about the UAL and this tournament that was coming up in Long Beach. And he gave me some names. And one of those names was Alan Fisher. He said, you're in San Diego, find Alan Fisher. He will at least teach you how to arm wrestle safely. And that to me stuck very, very much as a kind gesture, because, when you're a dad, number one, or you're not just a dad, but you're out there making a living, you don't want to get hurt. And what's everybody say when they talk about arm wrestlers? Oh, you're going to break your arm, right? We know that that's not the norm, but that's what people say. So I find this guy, Alan Fisher, who to me at that point didn't really know him. I shook his hand, and his hand was, if this is my hand, his hand was like off the screen big. I mean, he's got this giant hand, and he's got this incredible forearm. And I looked, and he goes, okay, let's grip up and let's see what you got. And it was a very humbling experience. Like when I say humbling, to be a man, in the 300 pounds at the time, and having good strength, to not be able to move a man that counts himself at 165, and him just kind of smile back and go boom, boom, boom. And it's like, all right. So I said to myself, this is something that I can really, enjoy, because now I know that there's some levels, and this guy is on the highest level. And now I can at least athletically start to make that transition from what I'm doing to something that's fun. I met guys like Paul Stevens. At the time, there was a guy named Baruch out by Allen. There was all kinds of different arm wrestlers. Dave DePew was there. And, it just started on the lowest rung. And I went to that first UAL in Long Beach, and I got hooked at that point. Mike Gould was there. Just a bunch of great guys from the LA area that ultimately I found that I just like being around, right? I mean, people always say, what's the allure of arm wrestling? And for me, it's to be around a bunch of guys that I enjoy being around in a setting that, is competitive. But, I can go to a wedding and not like half the people there. I go to an arm wrestling match, I like everybody there. So it was a really good outlet for me. And then ultimately, I started to progress. I thought I started to get halfway decent, as I'll call a up-and-coming amateur, low-end regional pro. Pulled in some wall tournaments, did pretty well on an amateur end, horrible on a pro end. And then I got to a pro tournament, and then unfortunately, that was my first big injury that kind of took me out of really any kind of progression thereafter. Now, the non-fish story is, and I always say people always tell fish stories of how good they are, what they caught, or I would never have been a great pro. And there's lots of reasons why. I was late to the game. Number one, as we know, there's certain levels of dedication to the sport you have to be at to become a really top-end elite pro. Genetics plays a big part of that as well. So I was very content being just a regional guy. And some of my best tournaments have not been, what people would write home about. I mean, if I go 2-2 on a pro tournament back then, or even now, that's a pretty good accomplishment for me if I catch 2 in, right?
Yeah.
But for me, that was the love of the sport, and it got me in front of people to, it puts you in an uncomfortable zone, and in life, sometimes you have, you've got to put yourself out there to be judged. And it put me out there on a platform to be able to say, hey, listen, I'm going to fail, but the humbling fact is that I'm going to fail trying. And it still stayed within the progression of how I run my life and my business, is that I never shy away from anything. And so arm wrestling just kind of became that thing for me. My left hand has gotten better over the years. I think that's probably still a decently competitive thing for me on a very low level. I mean, on a national level, I'd get blown out. But if I'm at a regional tournament, left-handed, I can win a few matches. Right hand, I can only, I have to carve in. I have to go into a hook. It's just the way the tendons have healed. I just can't move with it. But again, it's not even about whether or not I could become a national champion. I just love the sport. So that's my progression. And then you really, maybe the follow-up question would be, or the follow-up answer, as we came out of COVID, I thought that there was really an opening at that time for tournament arm wrestling. And that was really what.
That was the next question.
I'm sorry. I can't look down on your paper there.
No, don't worry. Just keep going. Keep going. Like the next question is, how did you came up with the World Series of Arm Wrestling?
Well, it's a selfless thing and it's a selfish thing. The selfless thing is, Manolo, is that I wanted to give back to the sport. And so after COVID, when Wall kind of collapsed, and sadly, I mean, nobody wants to see anybody fail. A lot of people think that failure is something to rejoice in. To me, in business, when your competitors fail, it retracts from the sport or retracts from the business community. So it's never a good thing for failure. Well, we saw Wall kind of dissipate through COVID, came off the radar. They were doing fairly well. They had their challenges, but they were doing pretty well. They came back and there was this big gap. And I've done very well in life. That's not pretentious. I just wanted to give back because the sport itself, to me, had been so fun over the last 8 to 10 years that it was time for me to maybe do something in return. And so from the thing that I had that seemed to make a difference was, at the time we're getting back into entertainment. I had distribution contacts. I have value of finance that was allotted to me through my success. And I said, okay, let's try to do this a different way. Let's see if we can make this thing last, right? I mean, there's been a lot of promoters and producers that have come in the past. So what's made them unsuccessful? So I started to study that, and I started to look at the guys that have been very, very successful in terms of longevity. I started to study that, and then I started to kind of put 2 and 2 together, and I found that the tournament gurus, the Bill Collins of the world, some of the better promoters of the world that have been around for a long time. The reason they've been very successful is they're very steady Eddie tournament guys, right? And they know what their building block and foundation was. I looked at some of the other federations and why they were getting some accolades, and they were looking at the money aspect of this. They're that's where some people started to roll to. But so if I take the best of both worlds and I start a process of telling the story and getting people to understand and learn about arm wrestlers, could we have a winning equation? And and ultimately you take the chance, right? I mean, when you know, I looked at that first year in business and I said, okay, I've got a 5-year plan and I've got a 10-year plan. But both my 5-year and my 10-year plan starts here and it goes here. It doesn't go like this. It doesn't go like this. I purposely made it so I started very humbly, with what I wanted to give, create in terms of a consistent pattern, build it up each year, and then ultimately start growing organically from within the community. And I think we've done that. I mean, ultimately, we're always on the growth factor, right? I mean, we're always looking for the next big thing in any industry to stay relevant. But I think where our relevance has been the most impressive is that we've stayed away from all of the traps that maybe others have found themselves in. We've stayed within what I call delivery mode. If we promise you something, we deliver it. If I tell you we're going to put $28,000 up for the first year, by God, we've got $28,000 in the bank. You can, at any time, you can ask me to show you what that number looks like, right? And we've consistently grown every year. We started with right payouts, then we went to right and left, then we went to right, left, and women. This year we're going to be, I think, pretty close to $75,000 plus prizes on top of that. So I'm pretty sure we're going to get to about, when you start to factor in hotel rooms for the winners of regionals, the watches, all of the supplement sponsors, we're going to be pretty close to about $150,000 for the finals, which is a pretty good number. And so, we continue to work in that manner in season 4, where we're getting a little bit better. This year, we're so close to announcing it. I have to follow the protocols and the rollout for where our next streaming partner is going to be. I think people are going to get really excited about it. It's really the pinnacle of all stations when it comes to sports. So I'm pretty happy where we're at. But we've had, in the industry too, we've had some hurdles, and we sent in season 2 to Tubi and Amazon and some other platforms, and we've been waiting on it for 6 months. But in looking at that, it gave me the opportunity to identify a better way to do this. So when I look at it, I said, well, what's our big hindrance here? We're under network decisions. So they've already greenlighted, they've already accepted it. They just have to flip a toggle switch and it goes. So now what I did was I said, okay, how do we get away from that so that way we get it to the consumer faster and still able to remunerate this in a way that it continues to better the sport? So we started the Inside Arm Wrestling Fast channel, which is now streaming on FLS. We launched Radiate platform last week. I mean, that's, in 36 months, our growth factor looks to be on a competitive level with the Tubi TV or Freevee or Sling, the top tier guys. And what that'll do is I won't have to wait in the future to be able to put my show out. I'll put it out on my own connection, and then I don't have any problems. And a lot of people say put it on YouTube, but I think there's a little bit of a lost leader to it. We're better than a YouTube sport. And that doesn't discount the fact that YouTube is the largest streaming value of viewers and programming globally. That they're the biggest platform out there. But I think that there's a successful level to being able to say we are streaming on the same station that the Super Bowl streams on, right? We are on the highest, value of platform for movies and series called Amazon. We are going to that next platform, that 4-letter acronym that we really can't say yet. So I think that's why we've been successful.
And if I see it like this, if YouTube is so great, why isn't arm wrestling prime time and at the highest level and very, very famous? Because I mean, there's like 100,000 channels of arm wrestling in YouTube, and it's a great platform, and it's bigger, it's the biggest in the world, but it doesn't get anyone to that stage, that prime time stage. And that's why I like your vision, like what you're doing, because you're taking it to where, like, it might be a platform that it's maybe not as big as YouTube, but it gets way more attention because in YouTube is so big that things get lost, you know?
There's an interesting value. And being in the world of entertainment and owning the distribution company, I speak with a lot of platforms and networks on a consistent basis. The value of arm wrestling is actually the hindrance of arm wrestling. And what I mean is that dominance from the go and the quickness of the sport leads to very little entertainment value for networks, right? When you look at football, it's a 60-minute game, NBA, same. Hockey, I think, is what, 3 20-minute periods. So arm wrestling is a very fast sport. And the lead up is not always that exciting, right? I mean, watching guys get a grip for 3 to 4 minutes, if you're the home viewer, you've already moved on the station, right? I mean, so how do you combat the attention span of a sports enthusiast and turn it into a program that they will want to watch, and then do it in a way that they can stay interested? And I think what we came up with in season 4 is what we've seen in season 2 and 3 is tell more backstories, get a more medley-based program, which means show more of those clips, those 3-second matches over the course of 30 minutes. So there's always a visual expectation. And then we have the gaming platform called BetSparkit, where you'll be able to bet this year on tournaments. So I think we've kind of found a few of those missing links, and I'm hoping that's when you start to talk about gambling, I think you start opening up sports to millions and millions of people, right? There's people that'll gamble on goldfish, swimming. Listen, you go down to I think it's a PB Shore House in Pacific Beach. I think on Tuesday night, my son says they have goldfish racing, right? So people will bet on anything, right? So so if you start to look at that, and now all of a sudden you have on a Tuesday night, arm wrestling where people can gamble, well, people are going to pay attention, right? I mean, women's sports have gotten better over the years because of the gambling. I'm not saying that women's sports aren't equally as important, but would you rather watch, the Lakers versus the Golden State and bet on that game and see LeBron, and Steph Curry go at it, and be able to win money and be through right to the very last second of whether it's an over, whether they cover the spread, whatever. I think, now women's sports have started to see that kind of gaming aspect as well. I think the level of energy is going to come up. So I'm banking on in some ways that's going to be the same for arm wrestling. Now that we have, the value of that gaming platform to be able to bet, to be able to keep people's interest there and find people that don't watch arm wrestling but want to bet on something. It's Thursday night, Manolo. I got $20 in my pocket. I can, go to bed, or I can go on to BetSparkit, place something for, Thursday night arm fights, and then watch it, be entertained, and either win or lose, right? And be a fan.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that we've missed over the years. And I'm hoping, and again, I could be wrong. There's several times in life that I am wrong, but I'm hoping that all those little things are going to take that step that we need on a domestic end, and move it to the next level. Because even though arm wrestling is vastly, vastly more popular in Europe and many other countries, when you look at entertainment, the metrics of entertainment is not how well you did in Italy. It's not what your distribution numbers were in Germany. It's what did you do on the US domestic dollar platform that really determines how successful you are, right? You could have the #1 grossing movie in Italy, and I could have just a regular streaming show on a platform. I could tell you I'll get invited to more, red carpet events than the other person will. And it's not because he's not better at what he does than me. It just means it's because I'm recognized on what the gold standard, if you will, of entertainment platforms are, and that's the U.S. market. So I'm hoping that translates, and it's a slow, steady pace. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. And we're in season 4, so we're on mile 4. we still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think slow and steady wins the race. And when you want to build something that is good and that it will endure the pass of time and it will last and it will be good always, you take your time and you do it with passion. And that's what Mr. Greg Sharp has for the sport of arm wrestling and the World Series of Arm Wrestling. And I agree with you. Anything in the world that wants to be uh entertaining or wants to reach more people with their entertainment is got to go into the US market, you know. And that's why we're seeing East versus West getting into the United States and doing shows in the States and all those, because everybody knows what Greg just said, you know. And I like to think that there's always space. The world is so big and there's room for everyone, and everyone can do their own thing and be successful, and we can at some point maybe everyone will work together, you know. And this is what I love about what Greg is doing and what people like Robert Baxter and Engin Terzi and even the guys from Canada, the Mac promotion, you know, they're doing good things and they are working for the sport.
Great guys. Listen, I'm a fan of JJ and Ian and those guys up there. They're really good guys. Listen, you know, they're no nonsense guys. They're no drama guys. They're much like the same cloth of business person that I hope I am and I hope I work with. You know, if they say something, they deliver, right? I mean, that's the important thing. And you know, you bring up a great thing with East versus West. And I don't know what the numbers are in Georgia from this last weekend, but I'm sure it was a successful thing for them. But every seat in Georgia, if you fill up 1,000 seats in an auditorium and maybe they sold 2,000 tickets or whatever the number was, the dollar value is so much significantly lower over there that you could do maybe a quarter of the same volume and still outsell on a dollar end, doing it here in the U.S. So I think they're very smart. I think they're intuitively smart. Robert Baxter's a very smart individual. Obviously, he's had a lot of success in life. I think they're on the right track. Really, the value that I think that arm wrestling has to really come to a head with, though, is getting that network behind it. You know, you look at arm wrestling almost like pro wrestling, and as we're almost like 70s and 80s pro wrestling at this point. And what I mean is that they had a lot of these regional promoters that were doing really well. And then you had this one Vince McMahon who came out and he blew the world off of arm wrestling and basically encapsulated everything. It still led for other opportunities for arm wrestling companies, but there was that lead for it. And really, that jump for the industry was TV. When they signed their TV rights, when they signed their TV deals, when they got off of the local PBSs and the cable stations, they got onto the primetime television, the dynamic changed. It changed 180 degrees changed. You know, it went from south to north. And those that didn't embrace that fell to the wayside. You know, you look at, I love movies and obviously in entertainment. You look at the Von Erichs, and they had the Sportatorium in Houston, and they did very well as a regional promoter, and he made money years and years and years. But where did he fall flat? Was he never got the TV contracts to get behind him, and he never wanted to get outside that region. So the growth factor of this sport has to be with inspiring, you know, entrepreneurs. I hope like myself and hope like Robert that want to go out beyond just the regional promotional value to try to get it to be seen on that highest level and be taken serious. I think we're there. I honestly, Manolo, I think we're close. I mean, I would not be at all upset, you know, that Robert and Engin find that path. I wouldn't be upset if I find that path. that leads us. I won't be upset if we both find that path that leads us. But I think the sport finally has a chance. And I think maybe, and I hate to be pretentious, and I don't want to lump myself into an unwanted group, but I think we finally have some business people that are like-minded, that can see a business direction to help get it there. And listen, there's going to be more Greg Sharps in the world and more Robert Baxters who are going to do it better. But if we're putting the building blocks out there, hopefully they're solid, so that way they're not crumbling behind us.
Yeah, and I wanna mention that I at least that I know of, you work really close with Alan Fisher, with Mike Bisman and Steve Black, and who else?
Don Underwood is with us. Ryan Johnston.
Yeah.
We've got Bill Collins and I have been great friends for probably a better more than a decade now. A matter of fact, Bill reached out to me just a few minutes ago on something completely different, asking my opinion on something. But we have quality people around us, and that leads to making good decisions. It's important to have quality around you. We have a lot of people that come in and come out of the picture. Certainly, we accept that, but we leave the doors open. We try to, because I think there's a value. And sometimes people want to do things their own way. And that's good too, right? I mean, sometimes the bigger picture isn't there for them, or they feel that your bigger picture isn't right for them. But I think the key to our success is that I like to say we're the non-denominational value of arm wrestling. We welcome everybody on all levels, and hopefully that translates out well to the athlete and to the fan.
Yeah, and actually, at the end of the day, that's all that we want. That translates good to the athletes and the fans. And yes, you are surrounded by a great group of guys. I would surround myself with them because I've known them. Like I told you before we started recording, I first heard of the World Series of Arm Wrestling through Alan Fisher when I was at his house. He was so kind just to let me visit him while I was in California, because I have family in San Diego. My father-in-law lives in San Diego, and we travel a lot to California. And it's been like 3 years we haven't been there, but we have family there, and I think maybe this summer we're gonna be back in San Diego, maybe in July or something. So I'll reach out if I do.
Please.
But I know Alan Fisher is a stand-up guy, Mike Bisman, Steve Black. I know them personally. I've collaborated with them in events, and top-notch, very serious people, down-to-earth people, honest people, and I agree with you. That's the kind of people I would surround myself with, because I think that's the only way things like this can move forward, in a positive way. And I respect that, and I like that people that I look up to, it's the people that you have around you helping you with this WSA thing, and especially that you have my friend Linda, a Puerto Rican, involved in it. So that's even better, because who knows? Maybe WSA can come to Puerto Rico sometime and do some filming or whatever. It's an open opportunity. Puerto Rico is a beautiful place, and we have great people, and everything is possible, and I love anything, and I support anything that helps my Puerto Rican people. And since Linda is your friend, you're my friend, so at least that's how I thought. I think that's how I think. So like we've talked.
I will say this, that her value in arm wrestling might be only superseded by the fact she's a very talented singer, and she just had her album release, or single release. So I always like to shout out those people around me who are doing very, very wonderful things and need the recognition. She's a sweetheart. Her husband was a former NYPD policeman. Her son was a former, I believe he was in the Army, and just good people. She's got a beautiful daughter, great family people. So, and a talented singer, although she didn't ask me to be in her video, it's okay. Linda, I forgive you. My dance skills aren't what they used to be. So
That's great. That's great. Now, we've talked about all of this, and maybe this is a really big question, but at the end, what do you want to accomplish with the World Series of Arm Wrestling? How do you see it? What do you want? What's your purpose? Like your finished product?
Well, I think the answer, I think it's to leave something behind. I hate to say legacy. I'm only 54 going into 55. I think that anytime you're in a business that you have enough value that you create, you want to leave it to grow after you're done, right? I mean, can I live to 105? Sure. I don't know why I couldn't. Would I do World Series of Arm Wrestling for 50 more years? The answer is probably no, right? I mean, we're hoping that we become an entity that grows, that we open up as a larger corporation, something that becomes of larger value, something that maybe brings in some team members that will help it flourish even further, which we've had some really deep conversations with a bunch of groups out there that can take this and make this a sustainable entity. And I think that's really the mark of the legacy, right? I mean, if you look at football, football started as American Football League and National Football League, and brighter minds came together and brought the two together, and now you had the NFL, and then you became the Super Bowl, and now we're on what 50 some odd Super Bowls. You look back at the Hank Strams and the Lambos and all of the Hallises and stuff like that. They're no longer here, right? But their legacy continues on. Their values continue on. Their names continue on. It's not a vanity play for me. I'm not necessarily looking for my name to continue on, but I really would love to see World Series of Arm Wrestling find that stronghold that takes it 20 years from now, 30 years from now, where this is the most recognizable world league. It's the biggest entity. It values itself on integrity, and it has a platform for the next reign of young people to come behind and take up the reins and push it forward, right? That would be the most amazing thing for me. But you know what? We're in an industry that hasn't seen that kind of longevity. So every year that we're in, and every year we get past this fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh are milestones for us, right? I mean, most money leagues don't make it. If we look at the last several of them, with the exception of Bill, who continues on with the UAL, but as more of a tournament league, UAL as a prize money league, unfortunately didn't finish well. The WAL didn't finish well. So I think East versus West and us really have a place for us to kind of push this and do it in a way that we change a little bit of history and we make those marks, that 8, 10, 12, 15 plus year marks. And then it goes on, right? I mean, I'm going to be a grandfather one day, not today, but I'm certainly going to want to see my grandkids. I just launched a TV station, a platform, Radiate TV. There's only so much that I can do. But the passion for me is World Series of Arm Wrestling, and as long as I'm able to afford, which hopefully will be a long time. Now, mind you, this will be our first year that we actually break even after 3 years. So that's always a strong point. We've actually created sponsorships now that will allow us to go 10 years of prize money with commitments. So that's important. So, I mean, I don't see us going anywhere. But I think if we can get past those milestone marks and we find ourselves, as a consistent deliverer of a product, I think the networks will find us as they have been and continue to and support us and throw more production dollars. And eventually I won't have to go into Greg's pocket. I can go maybe into, Ted Turner's pocket or somebody like that. And, they'll help us out a little bit. So you never know.
Yeah. And I share your vision. I think my dad used to say like great minds think alike. And when I got into this Pulseo TV and I created this Pulseo TV thing, I did it because I wanted my son to be proud of me and said, I'm proud to be my father's son when I'm no longer around, and I think that's how, like, men wanting or people wanting to leave their legacy, that's what brings out and creates the great things in the world, you know, and you know, and it's not wrong to say you want to leave a legacy, you know, because that's why we come into this world, we get married, we have kids, you know, we leave a legacy, and I share your vision for the sport, and and me here in Puerto Rico, that's what I really want. Like I want what I'm creating or what I did or what I've done to last as long as it can when I'm no longer around, you know, and that's legacy, you know, and I respect that. I love it. I love it. We share. I maybe we share the same passion for the sport, just to leave something better for the generations that come behind, you know, after us. And I do see the World Series of Arm Wrestling being around for 15, 20 years more, and doing things, because I mean, people that have made it to this part of the show and have listened to you and heard you talk about your family and your businesses and the way you do things must know this man uh is someone that knows how to build things, like good things, like you just said, like uh wrestling in the 70s, you know, you saw that and you see what wrestling is today. That's the process that it went through, and now look at what it is, you know. That's what we want, you know, and I love it, and I love it, that comparison between the businesses. I love it. And many people that are in the sport have seen that Netflix special, the McMahon special that's around,
Mhm.
and they actually have reached out to me and said, like, bro, I understand so much things that are going on in arm wrestling after watching that I didn't understand before. And I recommend anyone from arm wrestling promoters, anyone that watch that documentary in Netflix about Big McMahon. You will understand a lot of things, you know. And and Greg, what do you see? Like, we talked about the World Series of Arm Wrestling, your vision, what you want to accomplish, what you see like your end game. But by your point of view, uh, with the entertainment industry and what you do that you're so good at, uh, where do you see the future of arm wrestling being, say, 25, 30 years from now?
It's a great question. And the real answer to that, Manolo, is, it kind of goes back to one of the statements that I made. I think the vision of arm wrestling, for it to be really, the word mainstream has been thrown out quite a bit recently. But I think the two things that have to come into play is global television licensing, specifically though with US based, the gambling platform, and then the storytelling behind it. Because I think the thing that makes this sport become relatable is that when you look at, and listen, Devin Lorette is by far the most influential arm wrestler that's ever lived. I mean, you may say that John Brzenk is the GOAT, and you wouldn't be wrong. But when people look at Devin Lorette, they look at this incredibly tall, incredibly developed, incredibly aggressive personality that does these crazy, intricate lifts in order to arm wrestle, right? But do they know a lot of Devin's backstory? Do they know well, they do know, Auden, excuse me, who's come into the mix. Do they know his backstory? Is it relatable? Do they know that he was a Canadian Special Forces, soldier? Do they know anything about Jody? Do they know, So what I'm saying is that we need to develop people's personalities. I think we need to develop stories so that way when somebody walks out of their house, they know that the guy 2 doors down or the woman 3 doors down could be an arm wrestler, right? And they may have a great story, and they may be living in their neighborhood, and they just don't know it. And I think until we become familiarity-wise recognizable. We're going to still be behind the eight ball a little bit, so I hope that the sport takes that direction. Funny enough, most people who recognize me, and this is a true story. The last maybe a couple months ago, I went to an event up in LA, an entertainment end, and the lead drummer for Rat. I use the story because it makes me laugh still. I meet Bobby. He's with his young lady friend Suzanne. Great people, and we're sitting there talking it up. He's talking to me about going out on tour because they're about to sell their library from the 90s for pretty close to $60-70 million. So I'm just at a business end, I'm enamored, right? I mean, here's a guy that I've watched on videos and stuff. And he kept saying, he goes, but I know you. We've met. I know you. I know. No, I know I haven't met him. And so he goes, you're on YouTube somewhere. What did you do on YouTube? And I started to laugh. I said, so did you watch me beat my grandpa and grandma on YouTube? He goes, yeah, he goes, you're famous. I love that video. Great heel. And he's like, now all of a sudden, it's like, he doesn't know me as Greg Sharp, the movie maker. He doesn't know me as Greg Sharp, the reality series maker, or the owner of Radiate TV, or anything else that I've done in my life. He just knows me as this YouTube guy, right? Until we get to the point where arm wrestlers are somewhat recognizable, I think that's always going to be a hindrance to us. You look at basketball players, listen, if you go to a bar or you go to a mall, and you see a guy who's 7 foot, what's the first thing you say? Hey, did you play basketball, right? If you go to a gym and you see a guy that's 6'5", 340 pounds with no neck and shoulders broader than a barn, you was the first thing. Oh, did you play line in the NFL? Right. So there's an equation. There's an equation that says height basketball, size football. There's no real equation. Cauliflower ear jiu-jitsu or MMA fighter, broken nose boxer. What is that value that gets us recognized? Only Alan Fisher has an arm bigger than my screen, or a hand bigger than my screen. So somebody might look at Alan Fisher and say, man, that hand is huge. You should be an arm wrestler. But if you go out and you see Vajan Segoyan, he's a 5 foot, maybe 4 or 5. I apologize, Vaz, if you're a little bit taller than that. Nobody would equate him to be an arm wrestler, right? You look at, you look at even Derek Smith. I mean, if Derek Smith goes out, and he's probably more of a polarized figure in the LA County because of his industry nightlife job, and but they ask him more often than not, did you play basketball? No one's, probably very few people have ever asked him, hey, are you an arm wrestler? Right. So I think until we become recognizable as a sport in terms of personalities, that's going to be the biggest growth factor. And so I think if we concentrate on that, and we concentrate on developing the value of recognizing or recognition, if you will, the athlete, the competitor, that will help propel us into the future. And that may be our biggest untapped strength going forward. I think once that happens, and doing the reality show, The House, maybe some other things, I think once we start telling people that the average person next door might actually be a superstar, and we can follow them, and they go to work next to us, and they teach, and they do law, and they have science degrees, and they're police officers. Until we start telling those stories and really developing those stories, and once we do, I think the sport's got an endless amount of growth, and won't stop. I think that's the real key for us to be long-term success. And if I missed your question and what I asked, because I started to babble, my apologies. But I got on a roll.
No, you actually answered it, because
okay.
that's what you see in the future for the sport. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't know if it's all right if I share this, but I'm going to say it. When Devin was in Puerto Rico, we were talking, and all the time he spent here was 4 days with me. He was talking about this project he wanted to do, this thing he wanted to do. And it's actually what you just said, like an Ultimate Fighter show, but for arm wrestlers.
Yeah, and that's the house, right? We're shooting that here this year.
Really?
Yeah, that's on the books.
Damn. See, that's the future. That's that. Yeah, that's. I think that if you're really doing that,
Yeah, 100%.
that's gonna propel us to, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think I really feel as if that's our next step, to bring the average, consumer out there to understand who we are. And there's two components to that show, the arm wrestling and also putting, the competitors into a more of a survivor type series, where their challenges make them real relatable, right? Let's introduce them as who they are, not just the moms, the dads, but the police officers, the firefighters, the bankers, the electricians, the bartenders of the world, the real estate agents. Let's start really, making people understand that we're regular people. We're not a bunch of drunks that turn our hat around at the end of the day, and then next thing you know, we're screaming and yelling and we're doing over the top stuff, right? We're not that. We're not that as an industry. And once we break past that kind of stigma, if you will, which I'm hoping that it's called the house, will do. I think we really take the turn in the next direction, and I'm pretty excited about
it. If there's gonna be a season 2 of the house, I want to be on it.
I will welcome that. It's like anything else. We're gonna look at the first season. We're gonna get it done. It's a pilot season. I have a lot of high level conversations with a lot of production studios, and we've had some direction on what they like, what they want to see. So we're gonna film it as such, and then we're gonna look at it. We're gonna take the iterations down and go over them one by one and figure out what works well, what the focal groups come back and say they really love, and then season 2 is going to be better, right? I mean, season 3 will be even better. When you get as old as I am, which is not that old, but old enough to remember Happy Days, the one thing you don't ever want to do in a show is jump the shark, right? Once Fonzie jumped the shark, Happy Days was never the same again, right? So the goal is to build it, crescendo it, and then be able to translate that into more and more success. Spin-offs, you never know. There might be a Manolo series from Puerto Rico, and I say this lovingly and graciously. You never know who you find out there that has a personality that people start to gravitate to, right? Listen, on Bravo, they've got, for whatever reason, they've got a show. I watched a little trailer on it. A young girl who has Tourette's. Right now, she's an adorable young lady, but she has Tourette's. So, who would, if you'd have told me 20 years ago that we'd be sitting here, taking something as embarrassing. And then listen, I don't mean that in a wrong way. I mean, Tourette's 20 years ago was something that people would hide their children in the closet. Like they wouldn't take their kid to the store. There was this really shunned value of maybe a child. And now we're saying, hey, listen, these are real people. I love it. Like, I mean, for me, you're celebrating somebody's life, and you're taking something that has been a closeted situation and really a condition of life, again, that has been hidden, and put it to the forefront and say, hey, listen, you know what? You need to see this. You need to see that these people are real people. You need to see that she has a beautiful smile, and she has a family that loves her, and she has a boyfriend, and she can have a regular life. And just because there's a tick or there's this value that just doesn't quite coincide, that kind of becomes awkward, you have to look past it because a person is there. I think we're going to find that in arm wrestling. I think we're going to find the RJ Molinaris of Swamp People who, are actually arm wrestlers, right? Great show. But nobody knows Swamp People as the arm wrestling show. They just know it as the Gator show, right? So, but there you are. You have an arm wrestler in there that's one of the, has been one of the top regionals, if not national type competitors for decades. You look at SWAT and you look at Ken Johnson, and he's an actor, right? So he's on TV, but he's a great arm wrestler. I've practiced with him up at Mendy's many times in LA. So when you start to realize that that there's really some real, incredible athletes around you, people start taking notice, and getting that value of story out is going to be really the catalyst, if you will, that's going to get us to the next level, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I want to tell you something. Scott Mendelson, he was my first powerlifting coach.
That's cool. Scott's an icon. I remember Scott on the, back in the late 80s, early 90s, on the, what was it called? Iron Man magazines. They had the big Musclehead magazines. I used to love them. And Scott and I crossed paths many, many times. And when I finally got a chance to kind of, sit down with him, probably around 2015 at a wall tournament that he sponsored up in Riverside, he kind of said, you look real familiar with me. I said, we've always, I've been around the Olympias and I've been around the strength competitions for many years. I've always been a huge fan. And we kind of figured out how many real people that we had in common that we knew. He's a great guy. I mean, talk about a guy that can lift some weight. Man, that guy's strong as three people. But a super nice guy too. So.
Yeah. So the last question I have for you is, who's your favorite arm wrestler?
My favorite arm wrestler, I think, is my son. He's not as...
That's the right answer.
When he was playing football in college, I didn't let him arm wrestle. Although he's very fast, and he could honestly be a really good 209 arm wrestler. And then he joined the Marine Corps, and there wasn't a lot of time for him to continue to arm wrestle. And I hope he finds it, because he's ergonomically very gifted and genetically gifted with the way he pulls. So for me, he pulled in our North Carolina regional last year. He won the amateur class, coming out with his first real tournament. It hadn't been pulling for probably close to at least 10 or 12 months, which made me very happy. But the fact that he competed was the great thing. And so he would certainly be my favorite. And as long as I could still, do a few tricks to beat him, or at least challenge him, that's always a good thing. I think in terms of my favorite arm wrestler right now, maybe Mr. Warinsky out of South Carolina. Adam is he's a really fun arm wrestler to watch. I watched him pull Joe Fox. The first time I indirectly met him was at a tournament in Kansas City. Brian Kohler was the promoter, and Adam pulled Joe Fox. And I remember Travis was there. He was actually commentating. And I remember that Adam was just so composed. He just had like this blank stare. And it was like, I likened him to the Steve Garvey of baseball, Mr. Perfect. His hair was perfect. His bicep was in the perfect position. It had everything about it was cartoonish, right? And then he engaged and won. And it was just that slow, patient, very humble, but very, what's the word I want to say? There's a word I want to say, but very intentional arm wrestler. He was great. I thought class-wise, classic-wise, absolutely. I love, I've got to know Ron Bath a little bit. I think he's an amazing person. He's certainly still at this age a super strong arm wrestler. He competed with us in the finals. His right arm, after it was done, was the size of a Volkswagen car. It was just incredibly big. I'm a fan of my friend Travis. We have some fun conversations. I'm a fan of Mike Bisman's. He's a great guy. I'm a Vaz fan. I've got a lot of fans. I'm a fan of Cody Merritt. The first time I pulled Cody Merritt was at a wall tournament 2017, a regional up in LA. I was an amateur just turning pro, and we got up on the right hand, and he just ripped my arm completely off. And I laughed. I said, you can return my arm anytime you want. Still to this day, I tell him he has to return it. But the funny thing was, he says, Greg, he goes, your hand felt so good and strong that I really thought that you were a sleeper and that you were going to beat me. I'm like, huh. And I was humbled by the compliment, but then I laughed because he's a world champion. It's like, if he only knew. Scotty Partington is one of my close friends. I love Scotty Partington. He probably is my favorite arm wrestler. As funny as that sounds, him and his wife and his son, who are regular Greco-Roman wrestlers, they're just quality people. I would say that he is maybe my number one of all time. He's just a very personable guy, and I think that's. I like to put my all-time favorites with the quality of people that they are, right? That takes nothing away from Devin. He's a quality man, and he's certainly the best maybe that we've ever seen. But I think he's got enough favorites out there. He's got millions of followers, I'm sure. So the Scotty Partingtons of the world, I'll stay with them. I like being their fans. And I think in terms of promotions, I think the Mac guys, I think they've got a good equation going. I'm fans of them. I'm fans of Ian. He's a I don't know him personally, but I've watched him, with his son and as a dad. Again, it goes back to the qualities of life of people that I really admire. So it's easy to be fans of those people, right? And I find myself it may be a humbling way that's who they are and what I am, as I'm a fan. I'm a big fan, and I'm lucky to be a part of the journey. I'm lucky to be part of the equation. But at the end of the day, I want people to win, and I'm always going to be a fan of that, and I think that's important.
Bro, I think that's the best answer I've had of that question ever, because usually people say, "Oh, Devin Lara, John Versink," but you did not. You went a whole different direction, and what did Joda said? He was like, brought warm feelings to my heart. Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's, to me, life is short, and I really mean this in a very sincere way. Is that it's such a better, more beautiful journey when you can look back and look at people's successes and blossom them, like blow them up, recognize them, talk about them, talk about who they are as people, then to look at people's, underlying failures. And I think I think if we take more time really celebrating those great people, not just athletes, but people, I think the world's a better place. And like I said, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Linda's. I'm a fan of yours. I want everybody to win, right? Because at the end of the day, it makes me feel good. Listen, if you were the best podcaster on Sirius Radio in 2 years or 1 year, next week, I hope that you're next week, right? If you made it to that level, I can sit back and say, man, I met this guy. Manolo, he's an amazing guy, right? He's a winner. I love that guy. He's a great story. I want to tell that story. I could tell that story to my kids. I could tell that story to my friends. I could, when I meet somebody that's a ethnicity of not just Puerto Rican, but just saying Puerto Rican, who do I could talk about? Now I could not just talk about Linda Lynn. I could talk about you, right? I could talk about people that matter. And when you start to structure your life and find that that's, in my case, I find that that's how I want to be. I want to live it. My life is so much better. And my karma's better. My life is better. Everything around me is better. I smile every morning. That's the way I see it. And maybe I'm unique. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, we're all going to find ourselves in the same place, unfortunately. But I want to be able to smile every day that I wake up, because it's important to rejoice in those people that do amazing things.
Yeah, yeah. I for one, I think you're right. And I wanna take this opportunity to say hello to my friend Scott Evans. I know you know him.
Scott's
He's a
a
real cool
Scott's
guy.
a
He's
great.
great.
But listen, Scott and Melanie are amazing people. I'm always somewhat humbled by the reception I get from them. They continue to be one of our biggest supporters, um, and quality people. I mean, really quality people. I mean, that's the reason why I think I gravitate to the sport is maybe because of the Scott Melanie Evanses of the sport and of the world. Um, it's important that recognize and to be heard and be stated, right? Um, I'm glad you said his name. He deserves to be stated. He deserves to be seen for a value of the sport. And I think if we all recognize those people around us too, we also gravitate to sport, right? Making Scott Evans a household name is important. Just as same as John Brzezinski, Travis, as any of the others, right? Because they all build a value and they give back, and they're heroes to the sport, to their communities, and that's important. So
Yeah, yeah. And I had him on this show a few months back, and I fell in love with the guy. We've been really close friends. We haven't met each other personally, but we've have calls and texted back and forward and share things. He's a really great guy. I love the guy. God bless him. And he's a good supporter. He's a good guy. He has a good vision. I mean, it's nice to feel like we have a lot of people like around us that we know and are friends with. So it's good, and I think it's a sign from God. I always pray that God takes me to where He wants me to be, and sometimes it's really obvious where the direction I have to go or He wants me to go, and I just follow, and I pray for my friends and my enemies, and I pray for the people that I know that I want them to do well, like the World Series of Arm Wrestling and Greg right here and Scott and other people, you know, and it's all good, it's all good. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Greg, for being on this show and having this great, informative and really interesting and fun conversation about yourself and your projects. And it's been really interesting. I knowing the kind of man you are and what all the things that you do that you don't really have much time in your hands and you juggle yourself between all these things that you do and family and all that. It's amazing. It's amazing to find uh see men like you when there's others that bitch and moan because they say they don't have enough time or they don't want to do or they don't do great things, and we have this man who doesn't have time for a lot of things, and he's doing so much for us because at the end of the day he is working for us, the fans, the arm wrestlers. He's doing it because he wants it to. He's not really making anything out of it. He do it because he loves the sport, and out of the kind of his heart he just wants to contribute to the sport that gives to us. It's either good events, good prices, or good entertainment about arm wrestling, and that's why I call Greg Sharp a great man, a visionary, a pioneer of what he's doing. And I will pray for you, Greg. I will pray for you and for the World Series of Arm Wrestling, and maybe someday, sometime, we meet each other in person, or maybe I'll be at one of your events, and we'll have a good time. Have a cup of coffee and just enjoy a good solid conversation about the sport or whatever we're doing at the time. So I I love this show. This is one of the shows that I will remember for a long time and talk about for a long time. Uh, and I want to ask all my viewers, the viewers from Latin America and places where I know uh, watch this platform from Pulseo TV, to please follow the World Series of Arm Wrestling. Go to your cell phone or go to your smart TV, download the Tubi app. Everything there is for free. They have a great library of movies and shows, and you're gonna put, it's the only platform other than YouTube that you will put arm wrestling on the search screen and you will get a show. And it's called the World Series of Arm Wrestling Season 1. And it's a great season. I loved it, you know, and I can't wait to see season 2, 3, and 4. And I know this will be going on for a lot of years and everybody will enjoy. So please follow the World Series of Arm Wrestling in all platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Download the 2B app, watch the show, and follow Mr. Great Sharp, who is a great man who does great things and knows a lot of stuff that can help the sport. And I bet that if any promoter out there that's beginning to do something and needs advice, I bet that if he reach out to Greg Sharp, he will help you and at least point you in the right direction, because that's the kind of man that he is. So thank you, Greg, for being here tonight. Anything else you want to add or say to the guys that are watching?
No, I mean, tune into your show. It's been an amazing honor to be on it. Certainly that without the athletes, without the journalists like yourself, the sport doesn't hold water. We sink. So it's very important that we support you guys back. It's very important to follow your show, and certainly, at the end of the day, I think the huge value of this community is the fact that we all kind of put everything we have on the line when we get on the table, but then we can walk away, shake hands, hug, and have that great cup of coffee conversation. And when you're in San Diego, please make sure you let me know. I certainly would love to buy that cup of coffee for you and have that convo. And shout out obviously to my son Aiden and my daughter Megan, my girlfriend Marisol, and everybody that's behind the value of what we do as World Series of Arm Wrestling, that put in the tireless help, that give us the advice, that puts the things together to make us work. I mean, the thank yous to them are just completely given. For me, it's a community, and without the community, I just a regular person. So I'm grateful. So thank you for that. I appreciate you.
We are grateful for what you're doing, and we are grateful for Greg Sharp and the great things that he does for the sport. So thank you for being here again. I will put up links in the description for all social media and anything and everything to do with the World Series of Arm Wrestling and Greg Sharp. So please go click on those links, give them a follow, give them some love, like, comment, support, anything you can do. It will help this great promotion that is helping us, the athletes. So thank you for everybody that tuned in to this show. I hope you enjoyed it and you find stuff about Greg that makes you go like, damn, he's a great guy and it's a great promotion and I'm going to start following him. So thank you, Greg, again. And we'll see you guys in the next show.
Appreciate you, Manolo. Have an amazing night.